Friday was the 71-year-old president's first known medical exam since taking office. In a statement released by the White House, physician Ronnie Jackson said it went, quote, exceptionally well and pronounced him to be in, quote, excellent health. Details are coming on Tuesday. Of course, we all remember the doctor who vouched for him during the campaign as the most fit person ever to run for president. Friday's exam came amid a national debate over the president's mental capacity, fueled in part by Michael Wolff's recent book and in part by his ongoing behaviors. Last week here on the program, I took the position that it's not a good idea to break the 40-year-old Goldwater rule that prevents people from diagnosing public figures without personally examining them, and that setting such a precedent could have catastrophic long-term consequences. One of those who reached out to me about my commentary was Dr. Jeffrey Lieberman. He is the chair of psychiatry at Columbia University and New York Presbyterian Hospital. He's a past president of the American Psychiatric Association, and he just wrote this opinion piece for the New York Times. Maybe Trump is not mentally ill. Maybe he's just a jerk. Dr. Lieberman, thanks so much for being here. Tell me how you see this issue.
Well, it's an issue of concern because President Trump is unconventional, at the very least, and his unconventional, sometimes erratic, out-of-the-box, offensive, vulgar behavior has sort of invited speculation as to what could be causing it. Is this just the way he is, coming from his background in his business world, or is it possibly a sign of something else, including some medical condition of a neuropsychiatric nature? And the point that I think I've been making and has been debated is that even if you have rarefied expertise as a doctor or a psychiatrist, if you're viewing it from the public's perspective, which is what's in the media, what's in the public domain historically, that's not a basis for making a definitive diagnosis. And if you want to express an opinion, that's fine, but if you want to say that that's more than that and should be used as a basis for enacting some type of action to remove him or constrain him from office, that's inappropriate.
You wrote a letter to the New England Journal of Medicine pretty much saying what you just said here. Quote, although moral and civic imperatives justify citizens speaking out against injustices of government and its leaders, that does not mean that psychiatrists can use their medical credentials to brand elected officials with neuropsychiatric diagnoses without sufficient evidence and appropriate circumstance. To do so undermines the profession's integrity and credibility. And by the way, for what it's worth, I agree with that. I think it sets a dangerous precedent if all of a sudden not only professionals but lay people become armchair psychiatrists. Here's what puzzles me, though. As a quote-unquote thought experiment with 7 colleagues, you kind of did exactly that for Vice and for Tonic, didn't you? You know what I'm referring to. Quote, the diagnosis that seemed most plausible was incipient dementia. What's the difference between the two positions that I've just put forth that are both yours?
Well, look, I'm not a political scientist. I'm not anybody who's familiar with government policy. I'm not a journalist who has expertise in this area. I'm a pointy-headed scientist and clinician. But I saw this coming, back in the primaries and certainly after the election, that here's a guy who's going to do things in a very unconventional way. It's going to invite all kinds of questions about what's motive. Is he crazy like a fox, or is he just coming out of the rough and tumble world of New York City real estate, or is there some real underlying psychopathology? And I was wondering, so what is the logical kind of remedy or process this will follow? And with just listening and reading a little bit, it became clear that there are constitutional mechanisms for constraining wayward or reckless or incompetent leaders. And they're called elections, they're called impeachment, and there's the 25th Amendment. And it turns out that the section of the 25th Amendment that applies here, the fourth one, when a president is incapable of fulfilling the responsibilities of office, that would apply here, but it's never been invoked. So given the fact that our government has not seen fit to map out what these steps would be, what is the process, what is the criteria, I took the initiative of trying to do a simulation. Now, the simulation in no way was intended to, and I apologize if it was perceived as that, as branding the president. But if you have a 70-year-old man who's 6'3", 240 pounds, has a history of his with no serious medical illness, he doesn't use any kind of substances, recreational intoxicants, what are the possibilities at his age? And we simply went through this as an exercise. But look, let me just say one other thing. If this was, Jack Welch or Bill Gates or Stephen Jobs or the head of a major corporation, and he began acting in a way that invited concern, the board of directors would convene, they'd make a decision of how to proceed, they'd possibly get a medical evaluation. But because it's politically charged, we don't do that. Apart from invoking some constitutional mechanism, the way to do it would be the physical that occurred yesterday. But I would bet dollars to donuts that a thorough neuropsychiatric evaluation is not part of that routine evaluation.
And maybe it should be at the outset of all campaigns, which would be my preferred manner of doing so that everybody gets both a mental and physical clean bill of health. I just don't like doing it midstream because I think it becomes very arbitrary. Dr. Lieberman, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.